The phone buzzed once at 9:47 on a Tuesday night. I looked at the screen and saw a text from my daughter. "Dad, I think I left Aunt Helen's lemon cake recipe in your kitchen drawer." My jaw locked tight. My pulse dropped low and steady the way it used to before things went dark in places I cannot name, because I do not have a sister. I have never had a sister, and my daughter knew that. That sentence was not about cake. It was a signal we built together 7 years ago in my garage, and it meant only one thing: I am in danger. Come now. To understand how a 64-year-old man in a quiet Georgia town ended up driving 40 miles through black pine roads with the calm focus of a man half his age, I need to take you back to the very beginning. My name is Robert James Calloway. I am 64 years old. I live in a town called Millhaven, Georgia, about an hour southeast of Atlanta, where the oaks grow wide enough to shade an entire yard and the summer air tastes like warm copper. People here know me as the retired safety consultant who moved down from Virginia after his wife passed. They see me walking my old retriever, Duke, along the dirt path behind the fire station every morning before the heat settles in. They see me sitting at the counter of Patton's Grill most mornings, ordering black coffee and a biscuit with pepper jelly, reading whatever paperback I pulled from the library box. They see me helping the Hendersons next door replace rotted fence posts. That is all they see. That is all I allow them to see. Before Millhaven, before Georgia, before I became the quiet man who fixes things and says little, I spent 26 years inside the United States Marine Corps. I operated inside units that did not exist on any organizational chart available to the public. Counterintelligence, threat assessment, the kind of work where you learn to read a room the way most people read a newspaper, where you learn that the most dangerous person at any table is never the one talking loudest. I brought those instincts home, folded inside my chest like a letter I could never unseal. I never spoke about it, not once. Not to neighbors, not to friends, not even to my daughter, until the night she sent that message and everything I had buried for decades rose to the surface like something that had been waiting all along. My wife, Eleanor, was the one who kept me human. Ellie. She had dark brown eyes that turned almost gold in late afternoon light and a voice that could settle a room without raising above a whisper. She taught music at the middle school in our old town in Virginia, piano and violin. She believed every child carried a song inside them. Ellie had a saying she carried with her through 31 years of marriage. She said it so often it became the heartbeat underneath everything we built together. The people who love you quietly are the ones holding up the roof you never even notice. She said it while drying dishes. She said it while watching me stare out the window on nights when old missions crept back uninvited. She said it once to Clara when Clara was 16 and heartbroken over a friend who chose someone louder. The people who love you quietly, holding up the roof. Ellie died 6 years ago. Ovarian cancer. They caught it late because the symptoms hid behind exhaustion and ordinary aches that a woman in her early 60s would dismiss as aging. By the time they found it, the maps were already drawn and the territory already lost. She spent her last 3 weeks at home. I moved a hospital bed into the living room so she could see the dogwood tree in the front yard. She loved that tree. I held her hand every evening while the light turned violet through the curtains. The last thing she said to me was not dramatic. It was not cinematic. She looked at me and said, "Check on Clara. She is more like me than she knows. She will carry things alone until they crush her." Then she closed her eyes, and the house became a cathedral of silence that I have never been able to fill. For the first year, I made 2 plates at dinner, set 2 coffee cups on the counter every morning, spoke to the empty chair across the kitchen table as though she might answer. Grief does not roar when you are older. It hums, low and constant, like an electrical current running through the walls of a house that looks fine from the outside but vibrates with absence in every room. Clara was my anchor, my only child, 32 years old when this story happened. She worked as a pediatric nurse at a hospital in Decatur, about 45 minutes from Millhaven. She had Ellie's patience and Ellie's dangerous habit of believing the best about people, even when the evidence argued otherwise. Clara was the woman who stayed late to read to children in recovery rooms, the one who remembered every patient's name weeks after discharge, the one who sent handwritten notes to parents during difficult diagnoses. She was also the kind of woman whose compassion made her blind to the person standing closest. Marcus Cole arrived like weather you do not notice changing until you are already soaked. Clara introduced him at a Sunday lunch in April, driving up to my house in his dark green SUV that looked freshly detailed. He was 38, tall, strong jaw, an architect at a firm in Atlanta that designed commercial properties. He wore a gray linen shirt that looked expensive without trying and shoes that had never touched mud. He brought a bottle of wine and a small box of chocolates for me, which I thought was a generous and slightly unusual gesture for a first meeting. He shook my hand with precisely the right amount of pressure, looked me directly in the eyes, called me sir twice in the first 5 minutes. Over lunch, he talked about his work with genuine enthusiasm. He described buildings the way some men describe children, with pride and ownership and a belief that what he created would outlast him. He asked about my time in Virginia. I gave him the safety consultant version, which was technically true if you stretched the definition wide enough. He nodded respectfully, did not push. Smart. Clara watched him the entire meal the way a daughter watches when she wants her father to approve of someone more than she wants to admit. I noticed the way her eyes kept checking my face for reactions. I noticed the way she laughed slightly too quickly at his jokes. I noticed the way she touched his arm when he spoke as if to silently say, please like him. I wanted to. I tried. For Clara, I looked for every good thing and found enough to quiet the voice in the back of my skull that had kept me alive in rooms where most men did not survive. Marcus helped me carry the dishes inside without being asked. He washed his hands before entering my kitchen. He complimented the biscuits and asked for the recipe. When Duke wandered over and leaned against his leg, Marcus knelt down and scratched behind the dog's ears with a gentleness that seemed real. Then something small happened. Clara started telling me about a young patient who had come through a difficult surgery. Her eyes were bright. Her voice carried the tender weight it always did when she talked about children. Marcus placed his hand on her shoulder and said, babe, your dad does not want to hear hospital stories during lunch. Let us keep things light. He smiled. She smiled. But her sentence stopped midair, unfinished, like a bird that suddenly forgot how to fly. She picked up her glass and drank instead of finishing. Nobody else would have noticed, but I was trained to notice. Ellie's words drifted through me like smoke. The people who love you quietly are the ones holding up the roof you never even notice. And when someone starts pulling at the beams while smiling at you, the collapse happens so slowly you mistake it for settling. I did not say a word. I filed it. The way I once filed details in debriefings that seemed small but would turn crucial 12 hours later. The months that followed unspooled like thread from a spool turning too slowly to notice. Clara visited every other weekend. Marcus came most times. Each visit deposited another small observation inside my chest, like gravel collecting at the bottom of a jar. If this story is already settling into a place inside you, if you recognize something in these words that you have seen or felt or lived through yourself, I want to ask you to stay with me. Subscribe to this channel so that stories like this one keep reaching the people who need to hear them most. The first Thanksgiving after they started dating, Marcus offered to carve the turkey. I handed him the knife. He carved beautifully, precise cuts, even slices. Then Clara reached across the table for the cranberry sauce and knocked over her water glass. It was nothing. A small spill on the tablecloth. Marcus looked at her and said, every time, Clara, can you get through one meal without making a mess? He laughed. The cousin visiting from Savannah laughed. Clara laughed too, but it was a different laugh. Tight, controlled. The laugh of someone who has practiced turning humiliation into humor so many times it has become automatic. I watched her wipe the water with her napkin, her eyes down, her jaw set. I said nothing, but my hands tightened around my fork beneath the table. A man who corrects a woman publicly for spilling water is not correcting a spill. He is establishing territory. 2 weeks later, Marcus came to help me fix the gutter on the east side of the house. While we worked, he looked around at my property, the small house, the aging fence, the workshop with its cluttered shelves, and said, you know, Robert, A place like this could really benefit from a professional renovation. I could draw something up, modernize things a bit. His tone was helpful. His face was friendly. But the words underneath the words said something different. They said, "This is beneath my standard." I handed him a nail. "I like it the way it is." Sure. I just mean for resale value. You are not going to live forever." He said it with a grin. I drove the nail in with one swing. Some men measure everything by what it is worth to someone else. They cannot see the value of a thing that simply exists because it was built with love and maintained with care. In January, Clara came to visit alone. She said Marcus was busy with a project deadline, but she was different that day, quieter. She flinched when I closed a cabinet too quickly. When I asked her if she was okay, she smiled too fast and said, "Of course, Dad, just tired, long shifts." But her eyes did not match her mouth. I have spent decades reading the distance between what a person's face says and what their body confesses, and that distance in Clara was widening. I made her tea. We sat on the porch despite the cold. Duke curled at her feet. She stared at the bare dogwood tree the way her mother used to stare at things when she was processing something too heavy to say out loud. "You know, you can tell me anything." I said, "I know, Dad," but she did not tell me anything. And I did not push, because pushing a person in that state can drive them deeper into the silence they are trying to escape. You wait. You stay close. You make sure the door is always open, and you pray they walk through it before it is too late. In March, we all attended a birthday dinner for Clara's colleague at a restaurant in Decatur. Marcus was charming that evening, telling stories, making the table laugh, ordering wine for everyone. The waitress brought the wrong appetizer to our section. It was a small error. Marcus called her back to the table and said, "This is not what I ordered. I do not know what is happening in that kitchen, but this is unacceptable." His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. The sharpness was in the precision. The waitress apologized twice. Marcus did not acknowledge the apology. He simply waved her away. Clara looked at her plate. I looked at Marcus, and I saw something I had seen before in men who held power in small rooms. The pleasure of making someone smaller. Not rage, not frustration, pleasure. Ellie would have known exactly what she was seeing. I could almost hear her voice. You can learn everything about a man by how he treats the people who cannot do anything for him. A waitress making minimum wage in a busy restaurant could not do anything about a man like Marcus Cole, so she absorbed his contempt the way water absorbs a stone, in silence. And I watched it happen the way I had watched things happen in rooms across the world where intervening too early would have cost more than waiting. But the cost of waiting was accumulating inside me like pressure behind a dam. Before I go on, I want to pause and speak directly to you for a moment. If you are still here, if this story has settled somewhere in your chest, I want to know you are out there. Drop a comment right now and tell me what city you are watching from. I read every single one. And knowing that someone across the world is listening keeps stories like this one alive. April brought the incident. I could not file away. Clara called me on a Wednesday evening. Her voice was steady, too steady, the way someone sounds when they are holding everything together with both hands. She said she and Marcus had an argument about finances. He wanted her to close her personal bank account and merge everything into a joint account he managed. She refused. He told her she was being selfish and irrational. She said he grabbed her wrist when she tried to leave the room, not hard enough to bruise, just hard enough to stop her. "But it is fine, Dad. We talked about it. He apologized." He even brought me flowers after. My chest turned into a block of cold iron. I kept my voice even. "Clara, I want you to listen to me carefully. Do you remember what we talked about in the garage when you were 25? Silence, Dad. Do you remember the phrase, more silence? Yes? Good. If you ever need to use it, I will come. No questions, no delay. Do you understand? Dad, it is not like that. I am not saying it is. I am just reminding you that the door is always open." She paused so long I could hear the clock on her wall ticking through the phone. "I remember, Dad, Aunt Helen's lemon cake recipe. That is right. And I will always answer." We hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for 45 minutes without moving. Duke put his head on my foot and stayed there. Something in me had shifted from observation to readiness, not yet action. But the mechanism that had kept me alive through 2 decades of silent operations had engaged, and it would not disengage until this was resolved. The signal came 4 months later, that Tuesday night in August. 9:47, Aunt Helen's lemon cake recipe. I was in my truck within 90 seconds, but I did not drive recklessly. I drove the way I was trained to drive, toward situations where control mattered more than speed. Steady, alert, every sense open. My headlights cut through the pine darkness along the county road. Cicadas screamed from the tree line. The air coming through my cracked window smelled like warm earth and honeysuckle. Before I left, I did something I had not done in 6 years. I went to the closet in the hallway and opened the old green footlocker on the top shelf. Inside were things I kept from another life. My service medals, a folded flag from a ceremony I never talk about, a photograph of my unit, 7 men standing in a desert I will never name, 6 of whom did not come home. Beneath all of it, wrapped in oilcloth, was the leather folder containing documents and credentials that still carried weight in rooms most people never enter. I did not take weapons. I took identification, because what I needed that night was not force. It was authority. The kind of authority that comes from a career where the wrong word costs lives and the right word saves them. I placed the folder on the passenger seat. Then I called an old friend, Martin Price. We served together for 14 years. He was retired now, living outside Macon, doing consulting work for private security firms. I told him the situation in 4 sentences. He asked one question: do you need me there? Not yet, but stay near your phone. Copy. That was all. 26 years of trust compressed into 12 seconds. Then I called the county sheriff, not 911, the sheriff directly, Frank Dawson, a man I knew through the Veterans Breakfast Group. I told him I had reason to believe my daughter was in a domestic situation and that I was en route. He said he would have a unit nearby but not on scene unless I called. I thanked him, then I drove. Ellie's voice filled the dark cab of my truck as though she were sitting beside me. The people who love you quietly are the ones holding up the roof you never even notice. And right now, at this moment, my daughter had sent a message into the dark, hoping that the quiet love I carried would be enough to hold up whatever was collapsing around her. I arrived at Clara's apartment complex in Decatur at 10:31. The parking lot was half empty. Marcus's green SUV sat in its usual spot. The apartment was on the 2nd floor. I could see light through the curtains. I climbed the stairs without sound. 26 years of training do not leave your body just because your knees ache and your hair has gone gray. I reached the door. I did not knock. I listened first. I could hear Marcus's voice through the door, not shouting, worse. That low, measured, controlled tone that is more frightening than any scream because it carries the weight of someone who believes they have absolute authority over another human being. I could not make out the words. I did not need to. The rhythm told me everything. Accusation, silence, accusation, silence. The pattern of a man dismantling someone piece by piece. I knocked. 3 slow, firm knocks. The voice stopped. Footsteps. The door opened, and Marcus stood there in a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a glass of something dark in his hand. Surprise crossed his face first, then a quickly constructed smile. Robert, hey, what brings you all the way out here on a Tuesday night? I came to see my daughter. It is kind of late for a visit, is it not? His body filled the doorframe, not blocking exactly, but not inviting either. Clara called me. She did? He turned his head slightly. Babe, you called your dad? I heard Clara's voice from deeper inside the apartment. Small, careful. I just texted him about a recipe. Marcus looked back at me and laughed. A recipe? Well, come in, I guess. We were just talking. I stepped inside. The apartment was immaculate. Marcus kept things pristine, everything in its place. The air smelled like cleaning solution and expensive candle wax. Clara sat on the couch in the living room. She was wearing a long-sleeved shirt despite the August heat. Her eyes found mine immediately. She was not crying. She was past crying. Her face had the stillness of someone who's been holding her breath for so long she has forgotten what exhaling feels like. I sat down across from her. Marcus remained standing. He leaned against the kitchen counter with studied casualness, swirling his drink. "So," Marcus said, "you drove 40 miles for a lemon cake recipe. That must be some recipe." "It is." "Clara is fine, Robert." We had a small disagreement. Couples argue. It is healthy. I looked at Clara. "Can I see your arms?" The room went silent. Marcus set his glass down. The clink of it against the granite counter sounded like a crack in the atmosphere. "Excuse me?" Marcus said. "I asked my daughter a question." Clara's eyes filled. She did not look at Marcus. She looked only at me. Then, slowly, she rolled up her left sleeve. There were marks on her forearm, not fresh cuts, not dramatic bruises. 4 finger-shaped pressure marks, the kind that come from a grip that holds too long and too tight. The kind of marks that sit right at the border of what you can explain away and what you cannot. The room went perfectly still, the kind of stillness I have felt before, in rooms with concrete walls and no windows, in moments before decisions that cannot be unmade. Marcus spoke first. That is from yesterday. She tripped getting out of the car. I caught her arm so she would not fall. "Ask her." I did not look at him. I looked at Clara. "Is that true?" She stared at me for a long time, and then she shook her head. One small, devastating movement, something broke open in that room. Not loudly, silently. The way ice cracks on a lake in early spring, you do not hear it from shore, but the structure beneath is no longer holding. Marcus's face changed. The composure cracked. His eyes went sharp. "Clara, tell him the truth. You tripped. I helped you." "No," Clara said. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it was the steadiest I had heard it in months. "You grabbed me because I tried to leave." Marcus took a step forward. I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I did not make a fist. I simply stood and turned to face him with the full weight of 26 years behind my eyes. He stopped. "Sit down, Marcus," I said. It was not a suggestion. It was an instruction delivered in a tone that men like Marcus have never encountered because they have only ever operated in rooms where they are the most powerful person present. I reached into my jacket pocket and removed the leather folder. I opened it on the kitchen counter beside his drink. Inside were credentials that identified me as a retired senior intelligence officer with classifications Marcus would not understand and affiliations he would never verify because the phone numbers on those documents connect to offices where men do not answer questions, they ask them. Marcus looked at the documents. Then he looked at me. The arithmetic behind his eyes was visible. The recalculation of everything he thought he knew about the quiet old man with the dog and the biscuits in the small house in Millhaven. "I am going to explain what happens next," I said calmly, "and I need you to listen very carefully. My daughter is going to pack a bag. She is going to walk out of this apartment with me. You are not going to call her. You are not going to text her. You are not going to visit her. Tomorrow morning, she is going to file a report with the county sheriff's office, and that report is going to be supported by photographic evidence of the marks on her arm that a deputy is going to document tonight." Marcus opened his mouth. "I am not finished. If you contact her in any way, directly or through anyone else, I have people who will know about it before you finish dialing. People whose names you will never learn and whose methods make anything you have seen on television look theatrical. That is not a threat. It is a description of my professional network, which I have maintained for 37 years and which remains active and capable." The silence in that apartment was absolute. Marcus looked at the credentials on the counter. He looked at me. He looked at Clara. And I watched something happen on his face that I'd seen before on men whose certainty has been removed, like a floor disappearing beneath their feet. Fear, not the dramatic fear of movies, the real fear. The cold quiet fear of a man who has just realized that the world contains forces he never accounted for. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am her father," I said. And that is the only title that matters tonight. Clara was already moving. She went to the bedroom. I heard a drawer open, a bag zip. She came back in less than 3 minutes with a duffel bag in her purse. She walked past Marcus without looking at him. She walked to me and took my arm. We moved toward the door. Marcus did not follow. He stood in his immaculate kitchen with his expensive drink and his polished shoes and the sudden understanding that everything he had built his confidence upon was a structure made of glass and it had just met stone. We drove back to Millhaven in near silence. The only sound was the hum of the truck engine and the distant call of whippoorwills along the Pine Road. Clara leaned her head against the window. "Halfway home," she said, "Mom would have known sooner. Maybe. She would have seen it right away. She saw most things before anyone else." Clara was quiet for a mile. "Thank you for answering, Dad. I will always answer." She reached across the seat and held my hand. Her grip was tight, like someone who has just found solid ground after months of walking on water. We pulled into my driveway at 11:48. Duke was waiting at the door, tail going. Clara knelt down and buried her face in his fur. She stayed there for a long time. I put her bag in her old room, the same room she slept in during high school, with the pale blue curtains Ellie picked out and the bookshelf still holding the paperbacks Clara read as a teenager. The bed still had the quilt Ellie made from fabric scraps she collected over the years. Clara slept for 13 hours. I sat in the hallway outside her door until sunrise, not guarding, just present, being the roof. The weeks that followed moved the way all recovery does. Not in grand transformations, but in tiny steps, so small you only see them when you look backward. Clara filed a report the next morning. Deputy Dawson handled it personally. The photographs of her arm were taken in clinical light at the sheriff's office. A protective order was filed by the end of the week. Marcus did not contest it. His firm quietly initiated an internal review after Clara's financial disclosures revealed patterns of control that extended into how he managed client assets. The charming architect with the tailored shirts was not a monster in any simple sense. He was something more ordinary and more dangerous, a man who mistook control for love and dominance for devotion. The legal system handled him. I did not need to. And that distinction mattered to me more than I can say, because revenge would have satisfied 1 minute and destroyed Clara's case forever. Restraint protected her. Ellie's voice, one more time. The people who love you quietly are the ones holding up the roof. I understood finally what she meant. Not the grand gestures, not the dramatic rescues, the quiet, invisible, daily act of being the structure that someone else depends on without even knowing it. Clara stayed in Millhaven for the rest of that summer. She slept in her old room. She cooked in the kitchen where Ellie used to hum while making breakfast. She walked Duke with me along the path behind the fire station, and slowly, over days and weeks, the tightness in her shoulders eased, the flinching stopped, her laugh came back, not the careful, controlled laugh she used around Marcus. Her real laugh, deep, from the belly, the one that sounded exactly like her mother's. In September, she found a small apartment above the hardware store on Main Street. Arthur and his wife Helen ran the shop below. They gave Clara a deal on rent and checked on her weekly, the way small towns take care of their own without being asked. Clara transferred to a hospital closer to Millhaven. The children in the new ward loved her. The staff respected her. She started a reading program for pediatric patients that became the ward's proudest achievement. I changed, too. For years after Ellie died, I had retreated into discipline the way I once retreated into operations. Structure replacing feeling. Routine replacing connection. But after that night in August, the silence I had built around myself no longer felt like protection. It felt like another form of hiding. I started going to the Wednesday Veterans Breakfast at the community center. Curtis, a retired Air Force mechanic who lived on the other side of town, had been inviting me for 2 years. I finally said yes. What I found was not what I expected. Old men telling stories about grandchildren and garden tomatoes and the impossibility of modern television remotes. Mostly gratitude for the privilege of growing old when so many of our brothers did not. One morning in October, Clara brought a casserole to my house, and we ate on the back porch while Duke chased squirrels across the yard. The oak tree in the corner had turned golden. The air smelled like fallen leaves and chimney smoke from somewhere down the road. Clara looked healthier, steadier. She wore her hair loose the way she used to before Marcus. Her eyes had regained something I could not name. Light, maybe. Presence. After dinner, we washed dishes side by side at the kitchen sink. Warm water, the clink of plates, the easy rhythm of two people who share blood and grief and survival. Dad, she said, after a long silence. Yes. Were you ever scared that night? Which night? The night you came. I thought about it honestly. No, not even a little. Fear was not the issue. Getting to you was the only thing that existed. She dried a plate and placed it in the cabinet. I was ashamed for so long that I let it happen, that I did not see it sooner. Most strong people think they can fix things alone. Mom's saying kept coming back to me. About quiet love, about the roof. It came back to me too. She turned and looked at me. You never talk about what you did in the Marines, the real work. No, will you ever? Maybe someday, when the right moment comes. Was that night part of it? The real work? I dried my hands on the kitchen towel. That night was not about the Marines, Clara. That night was about being your father. That is the only mission that ever mattered. She hugged me. I held my daughter in that kitchen with the evening light turning amber through the window and Duke snoring beside the door and the smell of casserole still warm in the air. And for the first time in 6 years, the house did not feel empty. It felt like what Ellie always wanted it to be. A place where people come home. When I was young, I believed strength meant never showing weakness. The Marines taught me strength meant acting with precision despite fear. But growing old has taught me the deepest truth of all. Strength is answering when someone you love sends a quiet signal into the dark. Strength is showing restraint when destruction would feel easier. Strength is being the roof that holds without anyone knowing it is there and never needing to be thanked for it. If this story stayed with you tonight, if it reminded you of someone who protected you quietly, or someone who might need a quiet protector right now, share it with them. Hit subscribe so you never miss a story. And leave a comment telling me which moment stayed with you the longest. Sometimes the people who need these words the most find them because someone like you pressed share.